Welcome to Breedy 360. Subscribe if you like, but if you like, subscribe. Let's go. We're in the entry hallway of the National African American Museum in Washington, D.C. If you look up, you can see the statues, the help desk. It's beautiful. I can't use a selfie stick, so I gotta hold this with my hand.
Just make a move, man. We got family up here.
One thing about it, you capture it, so you'll be able to video.
Yeah, if you pause it, look at it like I go close like this. You can pause it and read it.
Whatever you want. Sorry.
were taken away in the ship that came for us to another that was ready to sail from Cape Coast. When we were put into the ship, we were all driven to our homes. We found ourselves at last taken away. Death was more preferable than life, and a plan was concerted amongst us that we might burn and blow up the ship and to perish altogether in the flames. Being in this dreadful captivity and horrible slavery, without any hope of deliverance, beholding the most dreadful scenes of misery and cruelty, this made me often tremble and weep.
I have known mates to commit acts most shamefully to the disgrace not of Christians only, but of men. I have known them to gratify their brutal passion with females not 10 years old. My eyes have borne witness to scenes of depravity worse than I could ever have imagined. I know of so many weary countrymen who aboard the faithful slave ships preferred death to a life of misery and jumped into the sea. The closeness of the place and the heat of the climate added to the number in the ship, which was so crowded that each had scarcely room to turn himself, almost suffocated us.
This ship, though a much smaller ship, took on board at Bonny at least 600 Negroes. By purchasing so great a number, the slaves were so crowded that they were obliged to lie upon one another. This caused such mortality, nearly one half of them died before the ship arrived in the West Indies. The officers are permitted to indulge their passions, sometimes of such brutal excesses as disgrace human nature.
They took away all of these small pieces of cloth which were on our bodies and threw them into the water. Then they took chains and that I took together. We in the vessel, young and old, were 700. They wise men were both. They were all fetched around our feet. And all refused their stay fast. But there was no wonder. Every morning they had to take many and throw them in.
At least 12,500,000
These are our ancestors.
Onana Equiana was kidnapped and enslaved at age 11 and taken to the Caribbean and the Americas. Equiano endured a horrific experience of New World.
Yeah, how you make it out? You got reach in and go through?
They cleared and cultivated the land, building
Okay, you got the ticket and everything? Okay, because you got the 3 o'clock to pick up the box. All right. I know. I'm just like you. You see the bucket I sent you?
Philadelphia. Enslaved men, women, and children often worked in a variety of trades, as domestics, craftsmen, dock workers, and local vendors. In bustling cities, free and enslaved Africans had more opportunities to meet, build relationships, and share information. Separated indentured Europeans and enslaved Africans. It created enslavement. And Africans became black.
I know, I understand. It's crazy. It is.
The race-based system of slavery was racialized and had become more uniform.
Different somewhere else, we might get an issue with that. Got all
French,
but he got only the 3 o'clock. You get on the H&M to get out the box. It's actually going to
with the reliance. They labored, lived, and rebelled together. While all the colonies held enslaved people, the systems of slavery varied. In most instances, the condition of slavery was not yet defined. In some instances, a few Africans in America had limited degrees of freedom. On large plantations, enslaved people made up a black majority. This enabled them to maintain cultural practices and create new American cultures. In large port cities like Charleston, New Amsterdam, and Philadelphia, enslaved men, women, and children often worked in a variety of trades, as domestics, craftsmen, dock workers, and local vendors. In bustling cities, free and enslaved Africans had more opportunities to meet, build relationships, and share information. On small, rural farms, enslaved people often formed close relationships with American Indians and European indentured servants. They labored, lived, and rebelled together. It was racialized and had become more uniform. The law based slavery on African descent and made it hereditary and lifelong. This separated indentured Europeans and enslaved Africans. It created whiteness, and Africans became black in colonial North America. The dependency on slave labor spread across America, colonies as well as in French Louisiana and Spanish Florida. With the reliance on enslaved populations, new laws defined who was enslaved and who was free. By 1750, the system of slavery was racialized and had become more uniform. The law based slavery on African descent and made it hereditary and lifelong. This separated indentured Europeans and enslaved Africans. It created whiteness, and Africans became black in colonial North America. The race-based system of slavery was cemented in the law. It was fundamental to the growing colonial economy and would prove instrumental in the founding of the United States.
From their earliest forced arrival in colonial North America, enslaved Africans have rebelled. They watched with personal interest as mounting tensions between British troops and local seamen exploded onto the streets of Boston in 1770. At the helm was Crispus Attucks, a 47-year-old sailor and fugitive slave. He became the first casualty in the Boston Massacre, and his act of defiance marked the beginning of the march toward revolution. By April 1775, Massachusetts militiamen clashed with British troops, launching the Revolutionary War. The conflict touched everyone, white, black, enslaved, or free. With much of colonial society built on human bondage, some felt that there was a paradox at the heart of the American Revolution. Abigail Adams, a white patriot, wrote, "It always appeared a most iniquitous scheme to me. Fight ourselves for what we are daily robbing and plundering from those who have as good a right to freedom as we have." For Africans, the revolution was a battle for freedom from slavery. As 20% of the population, Africans could tip the scales of war and therefore could not be ignored. The British and colonial armies, though initially reluctant, sought the advantage of recruiting able-bodied enslaved Africans to support their cause. Africans aligned with whichever side offered the better promise of freedom. The British acted first. On behalf of the British government, Lord Dunmore of Virginia proclaimed a promise of freedom to all enslaved Africans who crossed into British lines to serve as loyalist soldiers. Boston King, a black loyalist, recalled, "They received me readily, and I began to feel the happiness of liberty, of which I knew nothing before." Later, General George Washington, low on manpower, enlisted blacks to fight for the Patriots. Black patriot Boyro Brinch remembered, "Thus was I a slave for 5 years fighting for liberty." Whether in segregated or integrated regiments, black soldiers served in pivotal battles. On both sides, they faced danger on the battlefield, including Lexington, Cowpens, Yorktown, and Bunker Hill. James Armstead, an enslaved man and patriot spy, leaked misinformation to the British, risking his life so that America could clinch a victory at Yorktown and secure a British surrender. American independence brought liberty for some, but not all. Africans who had fought for the British fled to Canada, where they gained freedom, but faced racism. Frustrated, Thomas Peters of the Black Pioneers Regiment petitioned for better conditions and even secured immigration from Nova Scotia to Sierra Leone for hundreds of black loyalists. Africans who served as American patriots found freedom restricted and even revoked after the war. As the new nation continued to wrestle with slavery and freedom, African Americans inspired others throughout the Atlantic world to continue the fight for freedom.
Across the nation, free African Americans fight for freedom, facing racism, violence, and economic hardship. Free people of color turn in cities, small towns, and urban settlements. African Americans established autonomous communities, foundations for freedom.
A camera.
Just look. The speculator, he sees who he wants. He talked to old master, then he slaps the handcuffs of that slave and take him away to the cotton country. Oh, that's an awful time. The slave owners were shouting and selling children to one man and the mama and papa to another. The slave cries and takes on something awful.
was too rough.
Let's see this cat.